Subcommittees formed for climate smart city assessment framework under the MHUD on urban planning. I've been fortunate enough to be taught by him during my 2 years at SPM Masters 2003-2005, and a few of our other colleagues are also accredited with him who have been to SPM Delhi during a similar time period. So I now request our sir to present, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Jindal, for the very long, uncalled for intervention. Okay, I'm told that there are a lot of first year students and there are some seniors and all. And as usual, I will try and keep my talk very simple. I believe that if we talk complicated things, then we only address a very small gathering. So even I am trying to even write articles and all for general public consumption now. Now, before I start this talk on FAR density, let me ask you a quick question and I want a quick reply. In one of my hands, I am holding a 1 kilo weight, and in the other hand, I have got a fluffy pillow of the same weight. Which one is heavier? This is heavier. Any other opinion, please? One says both are same, one says heavier. Let's take a vote. Is this heavier or is the pillow heavier? अरे बाबा इतना शुरुआत में इतना सोचने लगोगे तो आगे जाके कैसे you won't appreciate all that I have to say. The lady is right, they are both the same way. But what he is saying is it feels heavier. Now please understand, the 1 kilo which is concentrated in a one ball feels heavier than a pillow which is fluffy and which is very big size. Now what we are talking about here is something called density. Density is a phenomenon where things are packed in space. इसके बहुत interpretation and one of the best interpretation of this, if you are interested, is I will recommend you read a book called A History of Time. Have you heard this name, The History of Time? It is written by a scientist called Stephen Hawking. You heard the name of Stephen Hawking? He was a brilliant scientist, he was stuck with a disease, he couldn't speak, so they had to read his thoughts, all his murmur. Now in that history of time, he has talked about the density of a black hole, a collapsing star. And it's a fascinating book. It tells us about the origin of Earth. But the point that he has made in that is that a black hole is the place in which a star collapses. And hence it becomes very dense. And it becomes so dense that a black hole of the size of a golf ball cannot be placed on Earth. Because if you place it on Earth, it will cut through and go through and through. These are wild imaginations. I am saying this because unless you expose yourself to all these ideas, you will not be able to appreciate this petty thing of architects and planners who restrict themselves to the definitions. You know, there's a much bigger overview. So I'm going to talk about the terms that you must be all familiar with. FAR, that is floor area ratio, density and quality of life. Now let me begin by saying that, you know, in some places, when you are walking through a bazaar or street or residential area, you feel very nice. You feel something is very nice about that place. But on the other hand, if you are passing through some other places, you don't feel relaxed. You feel very tense. You feel that, this is giving bad vibes. Now, I have always thought, as an architect, as a planner, what is it that makes a place good or likable or beautiful or whatever you may say. I had the fortune of having extended travel throughout the world, and some of the slides that you will see are my collection. Mostly they are from my collection. A few are from outside. I have taken to prove the point. Now, when we say that a place or an environment is very beautiful, there are many things that contribute. Let's be fair. Density is one of them. You must have heard people who come back from abroad. If you stay abroad for 15 days and come back to India, you know the first thing that hits you? Has anybody had that experience, or your parents or your uncles? When you land after 15 days, 20 days, ये 6 महीने 8 महीने रहने के बाद तो दूसरी बात हो जाती है. But even when you come back after 20 days, the first thing that hits you is बहुत crowd है. Haven't you noticed? बहुत लोग हैं. भाई बहुत लोग तो हैं, लेकिन why is it that we see crowds everywhere? Now, that is not just because FAR or density is wrong, but we are used to living with higher number of people sharing the same space. So as we go along, I will make the point further clear. Okay. Now these are purely definitions. Floor area ratio, FAR we call it, it is expressed in hundreds. And FSI we express in a ratio of 10 is the ratio between the plot size and the number of times that you are permitted to cover the area. The ground coverage of that we call as a footprint. Density is described as the number of items per unit size of space. In planning terms, it is persons per acre or persons per hectare. Okay. Now, through density determination, the quality of life factor also comes into play. But what we as architects and planners control is the FAR. I am told that in some states they do not have a system of FAR, floor area ratio, but they have other means by which the total built-up area is controlled. Now, there are also standards of inhabiting these areas. If there is a classroom, then there is a certain standard of how many students per square foot. If there is an office, how many persons should be in that square foot. If there is a residential area, everybody needs a certain amount of space and privacy. But in our country, these rules of how many persons per so much of area, they are usually compromised. So we find that an office space that is meant for one person is shared by 2 or 3. देखिए बॉम्बे की जो ट्रेन चलती है उसमें जो सीट्स होती हैं वो 3 सीटर्स होती हैं, बट इनवेरिएबली उसके ऊपर 4 लोग बैठते हैं. वो अगर 3 होगा तो वो बोलेगा भाई जरा सरक जा, और वो 4 बैठ जाते, देयर इज नो मारामारी, नो फाइट. कई बार उसमें एक बच्चे को और अकोमोडेट कर लेते हैं, तो 3 की जगह 5 होना तो बहुत मामूली बात है, बहुत मामूली बात है. तो हिंदुस्तान में क्या होता है कि वी कॉम्प्रोमाइज, वी से कि थोड़ा सा दैट कॉम्प्रोमाइज when it is multiplied by our residential areas, our office areas, it results in a factor of crowding. Now this is I am setting a scene for the background. The global population as of today is about 8 billion. We'll talk more about it later on. On 510 square kilometers of area. Therefore, the gross global density is 16 persons per square meter, or 0.16 persons per hectare. We usually measure density in persons per hectare. If only the land area of 150 square meters is taken into account, the gross density of the world is 53 persons per square kilometer. And if the entire Antarctica, which is 142 lakh square kilometers is removed, then it is 95 persons per square kilometer. Now this is just, don't strain yourself too much. These are figures which are so high that they are very difficult to comprehend even for a professional. Some of the pictures that you find are pictures that will highlight what I earlier said about the feel of the space. Now here of course you see a beautiful landscape lawn. This is supposed to be a garden. You would love to have a garden like this yourself, but unfortunately you are not the Louis XIV king of France, so you cannot have the Versailles garden to yourself. This is the garden of Versailles. Now the average density in 2001 by country, if you take groups, Australia, Canada, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Argentina, etc., is 0.3 to 0.27 density persons per hectare. Now mind you, taking a density at a country level is merely an academic exercise. However, there is a point to be noticed. Then there is Colombia, South America, Mexico, etc. 0.45 to 1.05. Then there is a third category, France, Thailand, Italy, Singapore, which is 1.7 to 3.32. And then you find that there is the last category, India, Bangladesh, Taiwan, Netherlands, South Korea, 4.2 to 6.6. Now there is a substantial difference between the first 0.3 and 4.28 between India and other countries. On the left is a city of Shiraz in Iran, which is a desert town, which we talked about. And on the right is a metropolis from the US, Houston most probably. And you can see that their characters are very different. And the character of a small town and a metropolis are different. There is no denying that. On the left you find a comparison. This is by Newton and Kenworthy. You can note down, Newton and Kenworthy have done a lot of work on density and energy relationships. And they have concluded that if you plot the energy consumed in gasoline in terms of gigajoules per person with area occupied per meter per person, then the United States is at the highest level. What does that mean? In simple language, it means that the people in the US use maximum gasoline per capita to commute. And as we come closer to the meeting crossing point, you find Asia is the lowest. That means the Asian population consumes least amount of energy for commuting. Now there are several reasons for that. One of the reasons is that our cities are more dense than that of the US. And in between there is Australia and Europe. But this fact manifests itself in three dimensions in very unique ways. This is a residential area in Washington DC. You may not believe it, but some of the rich and powerful people stay here. They have a lawn which is almost 50-60 meters, then there is a slight walkway, then there is another 60 meters, then there is a driveway, and you can see yourself that in India we would be happy to have a public park here, but this is just the front of the residential area, and these areas obviously would have a very low density. This is low density in Buffalo, US. Again, the low density the usage of land per capita is again dependent on the total economy of the place. So these are super rich people who live a very relaxed lifestyle. This is low density plots in Melbourne. You can see each plot has its own green areas, its own parking. Some of them have a small swimming pool. And these are some examples from Germany, low density India, and low density in Singapore. Singapore, incidentally, let me tell you, was till almost about the late 70s. It was more or less like the houses you see in front. It had ground plus one or ground plus two, and the Singapore government systematically started to redevelop. They took down the old buildings and started to introduce a high density. Please remember that Singapore is an island, and they do not have the luxury of spreading and wasting their land. If you see their development pattern, you find that the south of Singapore is very intensely built, and the north they want to leave as jungle and green. They are very sensitive about their environment. So when they started this whole business of replacing their traditional buildings with these multi-stories, then suddenly they realized that they are getting into a kind of a situation where they will soon become like any American city. So they have now what they done is they have identified certain areas which have to be conserved very strictly, and there is not going to be any development on those areas. Then there are some low density examples from Germany and from Melbourne. Melbourne again is a city which has a very low density, except for the CBD. There are huge plots, there are green areas. The environment is beautiful from one point of view, but it is scary from the other point of view. For a person coming from India, it is almost like no person dwells there, because we are used to crowding. All over my visits abroad, I found that there was one place where you had no control on the density. And that, as you can see, whether you are in Istanbul or you are in Hong Kong or you are in Italy, a dead person requires that much space. So you have to honor the dead by putting them underground, and this gives you a residential density. It is ironic to call it residential because they are resting in peace. About 500 persons per hectare. Now this is a luxury in many places. In Hong Kong, they have already started to understand that there is not enough land to bury it. And there are lots of alternatives being sought. In places like Tokyo and Israel, they have already agreed to the fact that they cannot provide land for burial. So what they will do is, you incinerate the body and bring the ashes, you will be given a small locker. In that locker, you can accommodate him. So there are multi-story areas where that can be respectfully stored. And this is happening in several places. Actually, there are some interesting studies I was reading somewhere that the Hindu ritual custom is to cremate the body. Now, in order to cremate the body, you require something like 60 to 70 kilograms of wood. Now, for every one person, that 60 kilograms of wood would, over a period of time, take a toll on the environment. Now, we are all becoming very environment conscious. So, a lot of people are thinking, and all over the world there is a lot of thinking going on about how you can reduce the body in an environmental friendly manner. And there is an amazing amount of work which is being done. The best example of a graveyard being used as housing was I saw in Cairo. It is called the City of the Dead. Have you heard about it or read about it? You must read about it. It's called the City of the Dead. Why it is called City of the Dead? Because this was a royal crematorium at one time. And because of very lax rules and regulations, people started building there. Slums came. Very high density slum development started. And it started and it took off, and it has now become so intense that for any government, it becomes a headache later on. I mean, every now and then in Delhi, recently, you must have heard, there was an evacuation because people had settled very close to the fort. The, the conservation rules demand that there has to be a certain amount of green around our historical monuments. Now, there is a debate going on. Was it ethical to remove those people? They have been living there for 10 years, 15 years, and they are not living there for nothing. They are happy, they are citizens of the city. So, is it right to move them just like that? But if you don't move them, then the second question is, then do they have the right to come and occupy any place anywhere? You see, there are many things which are connected. So it's not a very simple answer straight away. Now this is low density housing in Kyoto, in Japan. Why I took this picture was something about it fascinated me very much. And that tells you something about the society. And if you have not guessed what it is, let me tell you that even BMWs and Mercedes are parked within the line. There is nobody who has parked the car on the road or two-wheeler on the road. Even the garbage, somewhere you will see here in the picture or maybe later on, is very neatly put, packed and set there ready to be picked up. The Japanese are known for that discipline. Now these are the kind of things that contribute to the nation building. That just because you have a big car, low densities. Now here, this is of course our India, and this is a very typical, although this is Nasik, but this could be any bazaar where the building heights are 1 ground plus 2, 3, even up to 4 floors. And then there are some other examples of, there is a low density in Bijapur, these are low density houses in Indore, in Nasik, and in Mandi. Now, low density in Mandi, which is a hill town, has very little meaning because a hilly town will not permit you to have a very high density anyway. Maybe there are small pockets, but otherwise one will have to be spread out. And now these are some of the pictures of residential neighborhoods from around the world. There is Toledo in Spain, there is Portugal, there is Dubrovnik in erstwhile Yugoslavia, and there is Italy. Now if you look carefully, you will find that even in these small towns, there is some kind of a self-imposed restriction, ground plus 3. In a small town, anywhere in the world, nobody stops you from going on and on, 4 floors, 5 floors, 6 floors, 7 floors. But there is an inherent threshold up to which a man would like to live comfortably. And if you are ground plus 3, then you can maneuver that. Ground plus 4 becomes a little difficult. I have heard that in China they are experimenting with ground plus 5 without an automatic lift. We are talking about only human power. Now, listen, if a city is ground plus 1 or 2, or it is ground plus 10, it makes all the difference in its public areas, on the streets, on the ownership of the vehicle, and so on and so forth. This is Udaipur and Jodhpur. These are our traditional towns. You find that they are only ground plus 1, ground plus 2, but very intense density. This is called rise high density pattern. And the planning of this, the architecture of this, as you find, is very typical. Enough courtyards are left, streets are very narrow, they shadow each other. Uh, Vehicles, cars are not a part of this culture, but nowadays they have come. When I went to Udaipur just about a few months back, I was horrified. My taxi wala went into a lane which was as wide as the taxi itself, and I thought he'll hit somebody. But they have learned to maneuver. If there is somebody coming from there, that person has to find a way, and this car goes and that. Now you see, we are compromising with our modern lifestyle with a traditional system of settlement and density distribution. This is Mysore, this is Florence, and on the right is Shahjahanabad, Delhi, which everybody is familiar with, at least in the photography association. In Shahjahanabad, the density is supposed to be very, very high. It is one of the highest, most dense parts of India. 400 persons. Spot density goes to 600 persons per hectare. Very high density. And when the density becomes very high, then there are certain compromises that you have got to necessarily make. Like when you walk in the street, you will be rubbing shoulders. You don't expect privacy because it's not possible. In fact, some of these buildings are so close that you can reach out and touch each other. And when the density becomes that high, residential density becomes that high, then the quality of life again changes. You will be surprised that a lot of people who live in these areas, they like to live there. Because they say that, we feel very at home. We know so many people. When I get out of the house, I know the chai wala, I know the meat wala, I know the kapra wala, I know so many people. They say hello to me and I say hello to them. It's fine, there's no problem. But if I stay in New Delhi, I will not be. So, the whole quality of life is very closely tied to the kind of a density on which you are operating. Now, this is again Florence and yeah, this is Florence. Again, as I said, see, no, not very much building control, but the buildings are ground plus 2, ground plus 3. This is what traditionally has been the human choice. Given a choice, human being will not go more than 2 floors, 3 floors. So nowadays, when we see buildings of 30 floors, 40 floors, in Mumbai you see buildings which are frighteningly high, 70, 80 floors. And there are actually studies to prove that if you stay on the 70th floor, you develop some kind of a psychosis. Because man is a natural product. He wants to be close to earth. And the further you take him from the earth, the more complications you create. Besides the issue of safety and fire and that, those are different issues. I'm just simply talking about your location in space. Now, in India, they are beginning to think about this, and in Surat, they have found a solution in what we call a mixed land use. The planning students are familiar with this term. Mixed land use is that life does not work in compartments. When the first master plan of Delhi was made in 1961, an idea was introduced that there is an area for industry, there is an area for commerce, there is an area for residential there. And we were conditioned to believe that, residence has nothing to do with industry, industry has nothing to do with commerce, commerce has nothing to do with the institutional uses. But now we are finding that this is causing a lot of problems. So there is a talk of going back to mixed land use. Each दुकान ऊपर मकान, because life does not work in compartments. You know, you when you go home, it is not as if you are cut off from the rest of the world. When you when you are in a shop, it is not as if you are thinking only about shopping and shops and money. So functions of life overlap so tremendously that some of these unplanned cities, so-called unplanned, fulfill the requirement much more than the so-called planned cities. It is very difficult to understand the human psyche and the behavior, but one thing is very clear. You know, life does not take place in compartments. It's overlap. All the time it's overlap. One function overlaps the other overlaps. So if you want to streamline that with respect to very specific land uses, then it gives you a lot of problems. Now we come to some very, very high density areas like Hong Kong has more than 4,000 persons per hectare. You can see the ambience. In India, there is a talk which is going on which says that if Hong Kong and Tokyo and New York have a city density of 13 or 14, why should India lag behind at 3 or 4? Our density at a city level is 3 or 3.5, whereas New York is 14, Hong Kong is 15. तो भाई हमने क्या गुनाह किया है? हमको भी 14 करने दो, 15 करने दो. But you see, now this is where your training and intuition comes into play. Hong Kong is 450 persons per hectare because number one, it has an extremely efficient public transport. The car ownership, vehicle ownership in Hong Kong is less than 9%. In India, with such a small population of rich people, you must have heard, 1% of India honors 50% of the Indian wealth. We in India have a car ownership which extends to almost 35 to 40%. Now, if you buy a car, 30 लाख की गाड़ी में लेके आऊँगा, तो भाई उसके लिए तो मैं जगह ढूंढूंगा और जगह नहीं होगी तो उसको गली में खड़ा करूँगा. I don't care about my neighbor. वो neighbor बोलेगा मैं भी अपनी गाड़ी में आऊँगा, तो तीसरा बोलेगा मैं भी ले आऊँगा. Now see what has happened to our metro city. You can't walk. There is no space left to walk because with high density we have failed to provide those alternatives which accompany the high density. So, if you have something like 400 or 500 persons per acre density, then you will find that you will choke yourself with the vehicles, which is already happening. Then you require water, you require sewage, you require electricity. All these things become a problem. So, in India, we are still struggling to find the right balance at the city density of 3 or 3.5. These are some more pictures of Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a fascinating study in human habitation. It is so tightly packed. You can see for yourself. I mean, what is the intensity of living? I don't know how many of us would like to live in a place like this. But they are living, they are enjoying themselves. And the government is doing all sorts of funky things to break the monotony. As you can see here, they have brought a ship and put it in the common housing area for people to enjoy, divert their mind, give them some open space. An actual abandoned ship brought and put there as a plaything. Look at the intensity of built-up area. Now the dialogue all over the world is that when you have such high density, then you have to plan in a non-conventional manner. If you just go on putting these the bus, which is done everywhere, these are Hong Kong pictures, and in Hong Kong,
It's a 1 hour at a time.
one, yes. Now, in Hong Kong, when I was passing by a restaurant, I saw these Hong Kong ducks. A duck is a very a delicacy, like chicken. We eat chicken, they eat ducks. And when I saw this picture, it reminded me of a very high density residential accommodation. We are all packed in like ducks, what say? Again, these are some examples from Russia. Very sterile, very mechanical. The whole idea is to accommodate people. In Russia, there are no final feelings. There is a command from the top that everybody has to be given a house, everybody has to be given a house. Finished. It doesn't matter.
But they
whether-
don't have density issues as well. So why Russia doesn't have any sort of density issues, no?
No, there is all. See, the thing is that with density come issues of other services. And if the government takes care of those services, then people don't mind going and staying there. I mean, a child who has grown up in this environment doesn't even know what Washington DC looks like. So he will be happy. He will only get his shock when he comes there. Now this is again Singapore. Singapore is famous for its nightlife as well. So they are trying very hard to maintain some of their old structures to continue their traditional lifestyle. Otherwise, you find that some of the world's best and tallest buildings are coming in Singapore. Now we come to Istanbul, which is like an Asian country, which has many things in common with our way of living. In one of the seminars abroad, one speaker was saying that Istanbul has 75% of buildings which are unauthorized. So I shook up and shook his hand and I said Delhi has 72% of buildings which are unauthorized. So the question now is that is this 72% unauthorized or is it the remaining 30% which are unauthorized? Because if you can't manage 75% of the city and you call them unauthorized, then obviously there is something wrong with it. So this is a very interesting debate, but the intensity of living and the way of living is very similar. Now you can see Istanbul is on the left and Delhi is on the right. The texture of old Delhi, which has a very high density, you can automatically make out. There is a lack of green spaces, there are winding lanes, there is something very good about it. But the problem is, in today's world, nobody wants to live there because everybody wants a car, everybody wants an air-conditioned comfort, everybody wants everything, which this place cannot offer. So there are lots of problems which are inbuilt within this. Here are pictures from this small town called Yaz in Iran. This is a desert town, and as you can see, because it is dry and hot, it is planned to be low density, low rise, and yet there are so many punctures. These are, small courtyards that keep the place nice and comfortable. I would say cool because the afternoon temperatures vary. That's here 45 to 50 degrees Celsius.
It's a little bit cool also. They're basically wind towers.
No, wind towers are there. You can see the wind towers. The wind towers only become active towards the morning and towards
Yes,
the
sir.
evening.
Correct.
If you are like we were going around the town at 2 o'clock, some people thought these are crazy people, they will die.
Yes, sir.
We had to wrap towels, red towels on our head because it was 47, 48 degrees Celsius. So their lifestyle changes. They get up in the morning early, they work for some time, then they take a break because it's too hot, then they work again. So it has to do with climate. A lot of things contribute to your quality of life. This is a picture of the CBD of Toronto. Now you can see the intensity of building here. The building on the left hand side, the smaller one, is about 10 floors. So you can calculate as to what is the height of these office buildings. When in the evening at 5 to 6, the office goers come out to go to their houses, it is like a whole town is retreating. Because you can imagine how many people would be working here. And if the same situation was in India, then the number of persons would be double. Because हम तो बोलते हैं ना थोड़ा सा रख ले. So each office will accommodate twice the amount of people. Now this is Mumbai, very high density. But in Mumbai, you must have heard there are these defunct mills, cloth mills that have gone defunct, and there is a lot of land which is released. And there is a tussle going on as to whether you should build high density housing there or whether you should leave them for green areas. But ultimately, the greed takes over with they are making very high-end posh houses, each house costing what 10, 12, 13, 14 crores. Maybe that's more than that. Maybe more than that. But that only highlights the point that we have made earlier that in India, only the top 1% owns 40 to 50% of the resources. Now you can see some more views of Mumbai. Although on the one hand there is a very high built-up density, on the other hand there are these sprawling slums which are very dense, very intense, but they are very low. I mean, they are on the ground. And Dharavi, you must know about Dharavi. You must have heard about Dharavi. Dharavi is one of the biggest slums of Asia, and there have been n number of attempts to redo Dharavi. The latest one, as you must have read, is a proposal from Mr. Adani that I'm going to set everything right for you, don't worry. But the residents don't want anything. They say, leave us alone, we are fine. We are fine. And the figures that come out of Dharavi are very amazing. Their turnout is about $5 million in terms of chota products they make. And these products, they implicate practically everything. You want a Louis Vuitton purse, go and order it, they will give you. You want a Rolex watch, you tell them, they will deliver it to you. You want anything which is fancy, they will give it to you. Of course, this is all fake, but you will get it. So they are very happy. They have trade like working on leather, dyeing clothes, and fabricating stuff. They want to spread out. They don't want to go into a very routinely planned labor where you will be only calculating how many persons per hectare is there. They say that is not our life there. So far they are realistic. Now let's wait and see what happens. And of course, this is Mumbai. Anybody who is familiar with Mumbai, Churchgate in the morning will know what density means. It is estimated right now that more than 7 billion people, about between 7 and 8 billion people, commute every day in Mumbai trains, which is equivalent to one Pune shifting up and down, or 2 Indores going up and down, morning and evening. And when you are living and working in such a dense situation, then you have to evolve a different set of behavioral patterns. There are stories which will tell you, Bombay Wala will tell you that look, if you are not used to traveling in the metro, don't go because you may be crushed. It's like a sea of human. You have to stand in the right place, they will push you in, and while coming out, you have to be at the right place, they will push you out. If you are in the wrong place, you can neither get in nor get out. This is accepted. There is nothing strange about it. There is no, you can't complain to anybody. And if you say, "Arey, mere ko to utarne nahi jate," then you go to army. Why did you get it? If you want to see your whole mental thinking has to change. It is you cannot be for yourself. Now, in 1950, the population of India was 861 million, while China had a population of 1.1 billion. China has slowly declined, and very recently we were told that we have equaled or overtaken the Chinese position of the highest number of persons in the world. Indian situation indicates that 25% of the population is estimated to be the under age of 40, 68 between 15 and 64, and only 7% is believed to be 65 and older. Now, this has very tremendous implications. Absolutely tremendous implications. While we are happy at one point कि हमने चाइना को इस ट्रेन में भी हरा दिया, I don't know whether this is a situation to be proud of or be worried about. Now it all depends on how you take this, whether it is a situation to be proud of or to be worried about. If this young population is well looked after, then it is a resource. If it is not, then it becomes a liability. This is Kolkata, which has again very high density. It is not a very dynamic city in the sense that you find lots of areas are decaying, lots of areas are old, and the total amount of dynamism built into the residents of Calcutta is not very aggressive in the sense that you know उसको सारे को तोड़ के multi-stories बना. They are happy. They are very happy with their city, and most of the Calcutta residents are very emotional about their place, much more than Mumbai, Delhi, or Bangalore. So there are lots of things that preserve or conserve a place as it is. Public expenditure in India on health is 17.3%, while the total health expenditure in China is 24.9, almost 25%. Sri Lanka, USA, it is 45%. Now, when we say that we have a huge population, we have to think in terms of health and education of this huge population. Besides the problem of housing. According to an estimate, there is a shortage of 19 million units of housing. These are very, very enormous challenges which lie ahead. If we cannot overcome these challenges, then we are in for a very rough time. These population challenges will need to be met in a very scientific and a very dependable manner. Otherwise, you can see the fate of high density. You know, we are not different from the ducks, or for that matter, the Bangladeshi train, which you travel on somehow anyhow. So the question you can ask is, what is the right density? How much FAR is enough? Now again, as I told you in the very beginning, there are no easy answers. And this is why, as planners, we are taught to appreciate many, many aspects that overlap with our lifestyle. a judicious mix of public and private spaces, a balanced mix of built up and open spaces, built up and open areas in and around the city, respecting the building bylaws, community living that fosters togetherness without infringing on the privately encouraged idea of sharing, a built environment that helps individuals and societies to grow. There is a question of equity and inclusiveness. These are terms that we hear about, but we rarely see in action. The density that optimally supports the infrastructure is very important. Like when the Indian developer says, why cannot our cities be 15 FAR? अरे FAR 15 हो जाएगा तो आपको पानी कहाँ से आएगा? आपका सीवर कहाँ जाएगा? आपकी गाड़ियाँ कहाँ लगेंगी? लोग कहाँ चलेंगे? We don't have the provision for that. The planning decisions that produce a quality of life are very closely interlinked and intrinsically dependent on one another. Thank you. A very high density, thank you. Now, has anybody got something which I can throw more light on? I am not here to tell you the answers. I am just here to provoke you to think of all these issues. I hope the first year lots, I have got something positive out of this. As I said, I don't have any answers. I don't know if any of my colleagues have their answers. We are all searching for the right ambience, the right FAR, the right quality of life. Sometimes we get it by fluke, sometimes we don't. And if we replicate the same ideas in other society, it doesn't work. It is like making a movie. कोई पिक्चर हिट हो जाती है, कोई पिक्चर फ्लॉप हो जाती है. हिट पिक्चर को भी जब दोबारा कोई कॉपी करके करता है तो फ्लॉप हो जाती है. तो when you ask these film वालास के what makes a movie click, वो कहता है पता नहीं भैया वो तो फ्राइडे में नहीं पता चलेगा जब मूवी रिलीज हो. You understand? So, but planning is not so hopeless. We know about few things. Some things we understand. Some things we are still learning. We have to see all over the world and see, learn from them. We have to learn from good planning examples within the country. We are trying. Any questions, anybody? No questions. So either you have all become totally experts, now you will be able to design the best entire possible, or you have been thinking that अब ये काम खत्म हो तो मैं घर जाके अपना काम करूँ. Which of the two statements, first or second? So I don't think anybody has any. Yeah.
So how could architecture or architects help in this? Because what I think right now is like more the density, smaller the spaces I have to design. More the density, smaller the spaces I have to design. Make them more efficient.
Yes.
So what else is there?
See, as an architect and also as a planner, you can only help if you have understood the problem. First thing is to understand the problem. If you are trying to sell an idea to somebody whose interests are different from that of yours, then you will have to use an argument by saying, देखिए, मैं ऐसा प्लान बनाने की कोशिश कर रही हूँ कि जो फला फला जगह बना हुआ है, सूरत में जाके देखिए, या नासिक में जाके देखिए, and when you are convinced, you come back and then we will have discussion. If that person is open,
Sir.
he will definitely do that. You understand? Architectural planning is not something where you can single-handedly change the whole city space. Unless you are a monarch, if you are a bird, or if you are Louis XIV, then you can do it. But anything less than that, या तो ब्रिटिशर्स हैं जो बना के चले गए, अब तो ब्रिटिशर्स हैं नहीं तो सिटी बनाना तो बहुत मुश्किल है. But at least you can give certain guidelines, certain parameters, based on certain facts that you have studied and you have a mastery of. In architecture, you can actually, it's all a matter of your response to a space. Some places, some spaces where you walk through, they are very inviting, they are very cool. Cool in the sense not thanda, but cool. Whereas other spaces are very intimidating. There are so many extraneous circumstances that can change the quality of a space. Take for example a street where you travel every evening coming from office or school. एक दिन रात हो गई, रात को 10 बज गए, आपको उसी जगह से चलने में डर लगेगा जहाँ आप रोज आराम से चल के घर आते हैं. Why? Because at 10 o'clock at night, there are certain other elements have been introduced in that space which are not there at 5 o'clock in the evening. And some of those elements are not giving you a sense of security. So, first part of the problem is to understand it. And then make a model or a prediction that listen, if we do this is possible. May not be 100%, but at least a starting point can be made. But then these are all things that are intuitive, feelings. Architects का काम जो होता है ना, वो साइंटिस्ट के काम से डिफरेंट होता है. रॉकेट लॉन्च करना होता है तो फॉर्मूला होता है, यू हैव टू फॉलो दैट, a plus b plus c plus d. अगर a plus b plus g कर दिया आपने तो रॉकेट आपका बस हो जाएगा. लेकिन आर्किटेक्चर में आपने अगर लाल की जगह पीला रंग लगा दिया तो वो स्पेशल फीलिंग लूज हो जाएगी, किसी की जान तो नहीं जाएगी. बट ये सब एवरीबॉडी विल कमेंट कि ये बड़ा अजीब सी फीलिंग आती है यहाँ पे. कलर्स हैव वेरी ग्रेट impression on your brain. So you have to be very careful कि exposed brick को कहाँ यूज करना और सफेद प्लास्टर कहाँ यूज करना. Have you ever wondered why all the hospitals are white? Hospitals के interior हमेशा white होते हैं, हाँ? Because it has been established that it is the most soothing neutral color. And the moment you change it to reds or dark blues, it brings the aggression out in you. यहाँ के जो lines है ना थोड़े से reddish हैं, इसकी मेरे को लगता है कभी-कभी कि यहाँ के students बहुत बागी हो जाते हैं.
In these situations, will it be better to make people more comfortable living in high density, or making them a little less comfortable so that they will change things? As in higher ceiling cantonments, the houses are only there to accommodate only 4 people in a family. So if someone has more than 4 persons in a family, it's their headache. But it's like they'll make them uncomfortable enough. So what should our process of
Very interesting question. देखिए मैंने अभी आपको बताया ना कि हमारे हिंदुस्तान का कल्चर है एडजस्ट करना, है ना. You are the first person who is complaining कि मेरे घर में 4 बेडरूम है लेकिन मैं हम 5 भाई बहन हैं और क्या करें. आमतौर से क्या होता है कि इंडिया में not only at the level of families, universities, institutions, army, देखिए यूनिवर्सिटीज में जो फैकल्टी हाउसिंग होती है, द हाउस विच इज अवेलेबल फॉर एन असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर, अगर प्रोफेसर को जरूरत होती है तो रेडी वो कहेगा यार दे दो ये दे दो, और असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर बोलेगा लेक्चरर का है दे दो यार मेरे को कोई बात नहीं। क्यों? क्योंकि शॉर्टेज है, नहीं लूंगा तो मेरे को और कोई ऑल्टरनेटिव ढूंढना पड़ेगा। मैं तुमको एक बात बताता हूँ, one of our families told me the story that they migrated to Canada. When they migrated to Canada, after doing all the paperwork, they got into a house. It was a family of mother, father, and 3 children. Within their going, within 7 days, उनका एक और फैमिली भी आ गया, तो उन्होंने कहा कोई बात नहीं हमारे घर आ जाओ कॉन्टेक्ट कर लेंगे। तो वो जो घर था, which was expected by the government to be fit for 4.5 to 5 people, and now 9 people living in this. Promptly they got a notice. Okay, you cannot do this. It's not allowed in this country. You have to find your own accommodation. Can you imagine that happening in India? हाँ? तो देखिए अलग अलग सोसाइटीज के अलग अलग नॉर्म होते हैं। अब हमारा जो है ना वो कितना तरीक सड़क जाओ तो उसकी लिमिट क्या है? 5 के उस घर में 6 जने रह सकते हैं, ठीक ठाक रहेगा, चलो ठीक है। 7 जने रह सकते हैं, वो भी ठीक है। 8 रह सकते हैं। ब्रेकिंग पॉइंट कहाँ पे आता? मुंबई में there are chowks where people use them, different sets of people. सुबह एक सेट रहता है, रात को दूसरा सेट आ जाता है। सीढ़ी के नीचे एक छोटा सा पलंग लगा हुआ है, एक अलमारी है, दैट इज द हाउस। जो चौकीदार वहाँ काम करता है ना उसकी मॉर्निंग ड्यूटी तो वो सुबह चला जाता है, और जो यहाँ रह रहा है उसकी नाइट ड्यूटी तो रात को चला जाता है। These stories are unbelievable in a Western concept. So there are no easy answers. You are right. Entertainment life is a very spoiled life. People ask me. They are thoroughly spoiled. हर चीज यस सर उनको मिल जाती है, पार्टी मिल जाती है, सब कुछ मिल जाता है। अब अभी रिसेंटली आपने सुना होगा गवर्नमेंट की नजर आ गई, the government has identified all the cantonments and they are having a plan for all these cantonment areas. So what that plan is going to be, we have to wait and watch, because land has a tremendous amount of value. And why should they play golf when we are, you know, it is like the Queen of France. If they don't have bread, let them eat cakes. सुना है ना? तो वो सिचुएशन आ गई है, लोगों के पास तो ब्रेड नहीं है, आप कैंटोनमेंट में रहते हो, ये तो नहीं चलेगा भाई। So pretty soon we'll have some news about the cantonment. Same thing, building of railways. Government wanted to take all the railway line. Railway said nothing doing. It is our land, we will look after it, don't worry. हमको मालूम है what is good for us. So they are now developing huge railway stations, malls, etc. and reaping the harvest. Otherwise the government would have hurt that. So there are many issues. There is no simple solution. But the point is that why should you be ignorant of this? You should be aware, so that if there is any question that comes up, you have to answer them. इसका solution ये है, इसका solution ये है. Doesn't matter if there is no solution. If I am setting thinking, that is enough. मेरा काम होता है. My work is only to settle thinking. No other questions? Yes?
I recently have seen that demand of housing in urban areas is increasing, but when people leave their houses in rural areas or small cities, the house remains empty. The house remains. So the demand is increasing. We say the demand is not shrinking. But on the other side, many houses remain unused. So what can we do as a planner about that?
See, there are certain things planners domain. There are some things which are not in the plan. अब अगर हमारे देश की 40% जनसंख्या गरीब है या गरीबी की रेखा के नीचे है, तो तुम्हारा फॉल्ट थोड़ी है, मैंने भी भी किया है ना। तो उस केस में मुझे माफ करो भाई, मेरा इसमें कोई रोल नहीं। बट द पॉइंट यू आर मेकिंग इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। अब देखिए क्या होता है, दिल्ली गुड़गांव में आप चले जाइए, you will find miles and miles of housing which is long term. It's a high end housing. This is not अब तो कह रहे हो ना शॉर्टेज है, शॉर्टेज तो कोई नहीं है, एक्सेसिव हाउसिंग है। वो हाउसिंग बंद करके रखी हुई, वो बंद करके रखी हुई है, या तो डेवलपर ने बंद करके रखी है, या एनआरआईज ने लॉक करके अपने दुबई में बैठे हुए हैं। तो वो जो 1% है हमारा, जिसके पास बेशुमार वेल्थ है, उसका सेकंड हाउस, थर्ड हाउस, फोर्थ हाउस लॉक है, और उसका एक हाउस है वो यूज करता है। तो हमारी जो सोसाइटी है ना, दैट इज अ वेरी अनइक्वल सोसाइटी। एंड व्हाट यू आर सेइंग इज एक्चुअली करेक्ट। देयर आर विलेजेस आफ्टर विलेजेस व्हिच आर लॉक्ड बिकॉज़ यंग पीपल हैव नथिंग टू डू। दे गो अवे। मुंबई के पास होता है तो मुंबई चले जाते हैं, कलकत्ता के पास होता है तो कलकत्ता चले जाते हैं, दिल्ली के पास होता है तो दिल्ली आ जाते हैं। वहाँ करेंगे, और वहाँ कोई है नहीं, घर में एक बूढ़ा बूढ़ी है, कई बार वो भी नहीं है, एक गाय, एक बैल, एक बकरी, इससे पहले भी होगा कंट्री। और वो यहाँ दिल्ली में और मुंबई में आके क्या करेगा? देखो ना उसके पास एजुकेशन, ना उसके पास पैसा है। That's why it is very important to be aware of the fact कि हमने चाइना को हरा तो दिया है, तो आगे क्या होने वाला है? The world is moving to AI. AI is a very highly specialized field. उसमें एंटर होने के लिए you require a lot of education. अगर आपके पास एजुकेशन नहीं है तो आप क्या करेंगे? रिक्शा चलाएंगे, बेलदारी करोगे, रिक्शा चलाओगे, घरों में जाके बांटा पड़ते मांगोगे, और क्या करोगे? तो हमारे दो किस्म की प्रॉब्लम है। एक तो ये है कि ये जो यंग पॉपुलेशन है, इसको नॉट ओनली एजुकेट करना है, इसको इतना एजुकेट करना है कि वो उस लेवल पे जॉब ढूंढ सके। क्योंकि अब मिडिल लेवल के जो जॉब्स होते थे, जिसको हम सेकेंडरी सेक्टर कहते थे, एक तो प्राइमरी सेक्टर होता है, एक सेकेंडरी सेक्टर होता है, एक टर्शियरी सेक्टर होता है। प्राइमरी खेती बाड़ी, सेकेंडरी सारा हाथ का काम, उसमें आपका कारपेंटर आ गया, उसमें आपका मेसन आ गया, उसमें आपका सब कुछ ही आ गया। अब वो जो काम है वो सब खत्म होते जा रहे हैं, बिकॉज़ एवरीथिंग इज गेटिंग मैकेनाइज्ड। तो जॉब बचे टर्शियरी सेक्टर में, कंप्यूटर है। अब a person coming from village can't go to a tertiary job. बेचारा कभी स्कूल नहीं गया, वो कंप्यूटर पे। And maximum jobs are being created in the tertiary sector. So समस्या बहुत है, इसलिए आप लोगों को कंप्यूटर समझना और पढ़ना बहुत जरूरी है, और आप लोगों को डिमांड क्रिएट करनी पड़ेगी। You will have to create a demand in the society that listen, we are needed. अगर वो आप नहीं करोगे तो फिर then you will be left behind. This is a very scary scenario, right? I mean, people may be celebrating that we have become the most populous. They're stupid people. That has a meaning only if this is converted to a strength. Otherwise, there will be a riot. कहानी सुनाता हूँ आपको, मालूम नहीं होगा इसके बारे में किसी को। रोमानिया का डिक्टेटर था बाय द नेम ऑफ चाउचेस्की। चाउचेस्की। रोमानिया इज ए कैथोलिक कंट्री। कैथोलिक कंट्री के अंदर abortion is banned. It was passing through a very bad time. This is 1959, 60, 61. So somebody told this fellow कि देखो यार, हमारी इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट नहीं हो रही है, मतलब हमारे पास पॉपुलेशन नहीं है। So you make sure that your country has a population, and then we will make a progress. And that we did. He said, yeah, that's very good. So, in the guise of religious belief, which bans abortion, he encouraged all the women to have children. In fact, he sent out moral police to check upon the women who were not producing enough children. And if any woman was thinking of having an abortion done, she was actually put behind bars. So, after a certain time, there was a panic. This situation, if you make it into a law, it converts into a panic. But he won't listen to anybody. He said, man, you have to plan here. Now, as time went by, the population went up. About 15-20 years went by. All these youngsters who were added to the main population, they demanded jobs. There were no jobs in the country. There was nothing to do. Then about 19 to 20 years after his passing this law, there was a revolution. There was a big revolution in Romania, and they got hold of the dictator and his wife, and both of them were guillotined. And the crux of the story is that when there was a revolution on the street, 90% of the people who were revolting were the result of those failed abortions who would not have come into this world had it not been his own order. आप समझ रहे हैं? डेमोग्राफी जो होती है उसके फार रीचिंग इम्प्लीकेशन होते हैं. And if you are blind, then so be it. So population तो हमने मैक्सिमम कर लिए, लेकिन उसका corresponding plan क्या है हमारा? That's very important. Anything else? Anybody would like to contribute or? या थक गए? बोर हो गए? चलो फिर. If you are tired, then shall we wind up? Thank you for listening patiently. I hope you enjoyed the show.
I, on behalf of all of us, would like to thank Kavas sir for enriching us. His lectures, at least during the time when we were students and till the time he was teaching, were pretty legendary actually. And people used to look forward to attending his lectures. He taught subjects very well. It's a sort of rewind for me all those years back. It's been some years, a rewind for me to have the privilege of attending Kavas sir's lecture once again. So thank you, sir, for being here.
Thank you. All the best.